Welcome back to the program. So these new batch of Epstein files is starting to come out, and it's starting to show some new names that, I guess could be shocking and surprising. I mean, not really, but some of them are. Obviously, we saw that Prince Andrew is involved up to his neck in all kinds of sexual escapades, not just with Virginia Giuffre, from a while back, but also so many other victims, from Russian prostitutes that were given to him to all kinds of different things. Now we're hearing about Bill Gates having STDs from all the women that were given to him. And of course, we're hearing about Catherine Rumler and all the lavish gifts that she was given. Again, big Democrat donor, of course, an attorney was it Biden, or it might have been Obama's administration. But a couple other names are coming up and are coming out. Obviously, Reid Hoffman, we know what a sicko he is, the founder of LinkedIn. But there's many others. And one of the other ones that is coming out are two people. And the second one, I think, is more shocking than the first. Elon Musk, of course, is now front and center when it comes to these Epstein files. And the latest on him is an email that was sent. And the funny thing about this is it's the date in which this email was sent. But let me read the email first. To Jeffrey Epstein from Elon Musk. Do you have any parties planned? I've been working to the edge of sanity this year. And so once my kids head home after Christmas, I really want to hit the party scene hard in St. Bart's or elsewhere and let loose. The invitation is much appreciated. And then it says, but a peaceful island experience is the opposite of what I'm looking for. This is coming from Elon. Now, the date that he sent this was on 12/25 of 2012. So that means Christmas. And by the way, the time is at 6:07 in the morning. Let's think about this for a second. Here's a man who has 14 children, of which 5 were born already after the fact that Epstein was arrested as a sex trafficker in 2007 or 2008, whenever that was. So what is Elon Musk doing on Christmas morning instead of opening up, gifts with the little kiddos? He's reaching out to a convicted pedophile and asking him if he can party in St. Bart's or, quote, on an island somewhere, which would be the opposite of what I'm looking for. A peaceful island experience is the opposite of what I'm looking for. In other words, he was looking for some action, okay? That's what this sounds like to me. And I don't know. I mean, December 25th, 2012 at 6:07 in the morning? Aren't you opening up gifts and presents for your 5 little children? Nope. I'm thinking about what I can do to party with a convicted pedophile. So I wanted to point that out. The second one, which is a little more on the shocking side, is Steve Bannon. It is clearly shocking. Here's what he said recently about Epstein. And this was a while back.
This thing, the firestorm passes, is if the 5 to 10 to maybe 15% of the Trump movement, the Pepes and the hardcores, many of whom are in this audience, just say, I've had enough of it. The Epstein situation gets down to one basic question. One basic question. Who governs this country, right? Who governs this country? Is it a shadowy network of intelligence, MI6, Saudi intelligence, the Mossad, CIA, elements of DNI with other international financiers and corporations and governments? Or do the people of the United States govern? All that information has come out, and the people have to weigh and measure it itself. This is the most populist thing we can do right now.
So
the only way this thing,
so that was him speaking about Epstein, and of course the Epstein list and everything else. Well, sometimes what do they say? Those that live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. Emails highlight that Jeffrey Epstein and Steve Bannon were extremely close. Okay? Look, I'm on the right. I'm MAGA. I'm America first. But if you don't think for 1 second that I'm going to go and cover things that are on our side just as much as the left side, I'm going to do it. Okay? What this does show so far is that still President Trump is not involved in any way at all. Now, yes, there's mentions of him, there's pictures of him, but there's nothing that puts him in a situation in which he is doing any type of nefarious activity. And quite frankly, I will say there's nothing that shows that Steve Bannon is either. But Steve Bannon has not been forthright on how close their relationship has been. So let's go through this a little bit. In November of 2018, Steve Bannon, formerly Donald Trump's chief strategist, this is from the BBC, so left-leaning, was in the UK preparing for a speech at Oxford Union. The event was interrupted by hundreds of protesters, and Bannon, who was due to board a flight that night, told Jeffrey Epstein in an email, quote, "Protesters slowed down the speech, don't think I can make the flight, and we're en route to Heathrow," as in the airport. Epstein replied, "There's a Gulf Air that leaves at 9:50 with a stop in Bahrain." Bannon replied, "You're an amazing assistant." The messages were published on Wednesday alongside more than 20,000 pages of documents from the estate of Jeffrey Epstein. The release by the House Oversight Committee in Congress includes an iMessage chat in which Bannon's name is redacted. For example, Epstein discusses chartering a plane from Scotland for the redacted user in the chat and offers praise for the, quote, Oxford speech. So clearly we know who that is. Bannon took part in the News Exchange conference in Edinburgh in Scotland on the 14th of November and gave the speech at Oxford Union 2 days later. Bannon, who again is not accused of any wrongdoing, did not reply to the BBC's request for comment. And then it says, Bannon was one of Trump's closest advisors. Yeah, we know that. He's acknowledged that he was making a film about Jeffrey Epstein prior to his death and reported that he has, quote, around 15 hours of footage. In a live taping of his podcast earlier this year, he said, quote, "We're going to release the film, the 5-part series, next year, early next year. But the newly released documents suggest that Bannon's relationship with Epstein went much further than being just his, quote, biographer, with the convicted pedophile occasionally seemingly to act as if he was almost like a personal assistant. A few days before the exchange went, Epstein appeared to have arranged a charter jet for Bannon. Epstein said, "How does it feel to have the most highly paid travel agent in history joking around?" Bannon said, "You're pretty damn good." To which Epstein replied, "Massages not included." Okay? Now, the other thing that shows how close the relationship is this. Epstein gave Steve Bannon an Apple Watch, according to these emails. Jeffrey Epstein gifted Steve Bannon an Apple Watch in January of 2019, months before Epstein was arrested on sex trafficking charges. Steve has been given his Apple Watch, read an email to Epstein after the gift was delivered, according to the Washington Free Beacon. Bannon, like Obama's former White House counsel Catherine Rumler, advised Epstein on media strategies as the convicted sex offender faced renewed scrutiny. In 2018, Bannon proposed making a documentary about Epstein's real story, and The Hollywood Reporter described as an image rehabilitation project. At one point, he even suggested filming on the island, a reference to Epstein's Caribbean property. In a November 2018 email, an Epstein associate asked whether to buy Hermes Apple Watches for both Steve and another person at $1,499 each. The documentary never happened. On the day of Epstein's July 2019 arrest, Bannon was still texting him to set up filming dates. So if he's doing a, quote, biography, okay, fine, fair enough. Maybe he wasn't involved in nefarious activities. But why does then Jeffrey Epstein make the joke about massages not included? Why is he calling him, his personal assistant, whether he was or not, joking around? And more importantly, why is he buying Steve Bannon a $1,500 watch? And Bannon so far has been silent. I haven't heard anything. I don't know if you have. Perhaps maybe Stephen Bannon will say something in the next few days, but the silence is deafening, shall we say, okay? And so I wanted to kind of point that out and cover that because I think it's important, because who knows? There could be so many other names. This whole thing, if I'm looking at it from a different perspective, the left must know that there's a lot of liberals involved in these Jeffrey Epstein files, and way more, as I've said before, way more on the left than on the right. But they could be using a sacrificial lamb here. In other words, they could be saying, well, look, Steve Bannon is part of these Epstein files. Even though maybe Trump isn't, it doesn't matter, because guilt by association, if we can get to Bannon, well, then we can say, well, look, Trump's closest advisor in his first presidency was Stephen K. Bannon, so therefore Trump must be involved. See, that's how these sick bastards, these prostitute whores in the media think. And they look at it and they go, well, we can't get Trump, so let's get one of his closest advisors. And now we're also hearing that Howard Lutnick may have had a much closer relationship than he let on as well. Now, I'm not bringing this all up to bash our side, okay? I'm just being honest and upfront. Clearly, there's way more coming from the left. I mean, Andrew and some of the things and the images and pictures that are coming out with him with multiple girls that are underage. Catherine Rumler, who was an attorney and also I think even worked at the Department of Justice at one point. She's all over the place. She got, Fendi bags. She got Gucci watches. She got all kinds of jewelry. So there's way more on the left than there is the right. But I think that, if your name is showing up in these documents, you probably should say something publicly to clear your name or, get yourself away from whatever it is that they're trying to put you in. And that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to use Bannon to get to Trump. It's not going to work because Trump's not in these documents in any type of nefarious way, at least so far that we can tell. But that's just part of it. The other thing that the left is doing is they are lying, 100% on when people are going into the hospital that, quote, were arrested by ICE agents. They are now lying publicly. And they are saying that if an ICE agent said that this person was arrested and, they got hurt somehow or whatever, they're going into the hospitals and basically the nurses are now lying and saying, well, we think that ICE did this or ICE hit this person, in the face when they really said that they fell down on the ground. They are literally lying. Now, how do I know they're lying? Because we already know there was a big expose on these leftists being taught to contact 911, okay? Call 911 and say, there are two men in an SUV with guns. And so they call that into 911. Now, they don't say that the two men are ICE agents on patrol or busting bad guys. No, they leave those details out. And they say, help, I need help. There's two men armed in masks with guns in their SUV. And I need help right away. So then 911 is freaking out. 911 is freaking out going, oh my God, there's an active shooter. But it's not, it's ICE. And it's been done over and over. They actually teach these idiots to do this. So why would it be any different? Why would it be any different with the nurses in the hospitals? It wouldn't. It wouldn't. ICE claimed that a man, and this is from ABC News, so this is, left-leaning, obviously. ICE claims that a man shattered his skull running into a wall, which, of course, the nurses said never happened. Intensive care nurses immediately doubted the word of a federal immigration officer when they arrived at a Minneapolis hospital with a illegal immigrant who had broken bones in his face and his skull. Immigration and Custom Enforcement agents claimed that Alberto Castaneda, whatever, had tried to flee while being handcuffed and purposely ran headfirst into a brick wall, according to court documents filed by a lawyer seeking his release. Well, it's pretty simple because their body cam footage is always on, and if it's not on, then they can get in a lot of trouble. So more than likely it was on. He probably was handcuffed, tried to run away and hit something and fell down, or he fell down and tripped and hit his face. But of course, the nurses at Hennepin County are full of shit, and they're all anti-ICE idiots. And so now they're lying, and they're saying that the ICE agent beat him or punched him or whatever. I'm sure you're going to see car accidents coming in Minnesota and elsewhere, and the person could have gotten into a bad car accident, and they will literally lie, just like they did with COVID, and say that, oh, this person was injured by an ICE agent. Even if the ICE agent had nothing to do with anything. That's their new tactic. Let's make sure that we can lie to the American public and tell them that ICE is beating people up and hurting them and injuring them when they're arresting them. And then they go to the hospital, and these asshole nurses that hate Trump, that hate ICE, that are all part of it, that are all activists. I mean, hell, the amount of teachers that didn't show up for work. I think it was it in California? No, it was in Colorado, actually. They literally had to shut down the school because there wasn't any teachers because they were out doing their ICE bullshit, okay? So I want you to be aware that when you hear a story that says that ICE roughed somebody up or ICE, broke a bone or did whatever, it's total bullshit. It's more propaganda from inside the medical establishment that hates ICE, hates Trump, and they're trying to figure out a way to pin whatever it might be. Hell, you could have a hangnail and they'll blame it on ICE. Okay? And this is a coordinated effort through the ICE Watch programs and the people that are funding it. So I want people to understand that. Now, the other thing that I was going to cover was one more thing on this right here. Minnesota, I said in the very beginning that there's no doubt in my mind that the fraud is at $100 billion. That's what I said. And you probably remember it was a couple of months ago. We saw Nick Shirley's video. We saw how much fraud was coming out. Everyone said that it was $9 billion. Then it jumped up to $18 billion. Then some people said it was $25 billion. Well, guess what? I came out immediately and I said, in just the state of Minnesota, it is going to hit and probably surpass $100 billion. Well, here is that guy, David Hawk, who was with Nick Shirley on every one of these different runs in which he was going through the Quality Leering Center and these non-medical emergency transport companies and these home health care companies and all the rest of them. Well, he was part of it, and he was on, I think he was on Fox News, and he had a short interview, and here is what he had to say.
Well, it's just more of the same. I mean, she's part of the whole, this whole fraud supporting network. She knows all about it. I've been contacting her for years about this fraud. She's never done a single thing about it. And, in her defense...
He's talking about Amy Klobuchar. So she's running for governor in Minnesota, and there are multiple reports, I actually talked about it a while back, that if she wins the governorship, that she's going to appoint Tampon Timmy Walz into the Senate. There's a lot of talk about that. So that's what they're talking about right here.
The Republicans haven't done a whole lot either. And so I'm really disappointed in all of the elected officials from Minnesota because, I've been running down this middle of the street with my hair on fire going, look at this fraud. And I put the number at $80 to $100 billion in Minnesota alone going back to 1988. And you're going to find out that I'm right. And see how the number keeps ratcheting up? It was 250 million, then it was $1 billion, then it was 9 billion, now it's 18 billion. And I said, you got to keep going because you have to include all of the city money, county money, state money, federal money, grants, NGOs, all of these things that are part of this fraud. That's where all that money in those suitcases at the airport's coming from. Just stop giving them the money and all those problems go away.
Little bite size.
Well, it's
So there it is. And what he was alluding to is the fact that they have now $700 million in 2024 and 2025 alone that have been put into suitcases and sent out of the country through the Minneapolis International Airport in St. Paul, Minneapolis. $700 million in cash, cold hard cash. So obviously TSA knows about it. They obviously have seen the cash. Are they getting a little piece of it to turn their head the other direction? Even the investigators have seen it. And they've brought it to the attention of the news media. They brought it to the attention of so many other people. And instead of doing anything about it, they were then harassed and intimidated as whistleblowers. So he's right. 700 million in cash alone in just the last 2 years. They've been doing this stuff since at least 2014, if not even earlier than that. And we've only touched the surface in Minnesota. What about other areas outside of St. Paul, Minneapolis, Minnesota? What about other suburbs and things like that? The fraud is so bad in that state. It actually is probably more than California and elsewhere. And David Hawk has said it too. $100 billion or more. And you know what? He's right. And I do agree with the fact that he is
just
more than likely
contacting her
correct
for years about.
on that as well. So anyway, those are my thoughts. What are yours? Put them down in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one.